It's committee time for a motion and some action on such.
Will the public speak?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, yes, please. From the public.
Here?
Yep, please have a seat.
John Murkoff, Summit Road.
Don't pick it up.
What?
The volume picks up when we start talking.
You, I like your drift. I've only been here since April, and when I signed up for Time Warner, I thought I was gonna be paying like $90 for everything, phone, and now I'm paying twice as much, and I have complained, so if you haven't gotten complaints, you complain, so there has been complaints.
They don't have to write it down.
What?
They don't have to write it down.
I know, I understand. And I think it, I don't know what you are permitting them to. Is it your wires in town? Or has there been town-wide discussion about this contract?
This contract, well,
You should gather up people and ask them what they think of the service. I mean, I don't know what control you have over this. And if you own the wires in town, you can call them.
they own the wires.
They own the wire? Well, what can say, do we have alternatives? Can Verizon come in?
The city attorney, can you explain what a franchise agreement is about? You know, how did we get here?
Sure, I mean, and the IMS director, I'm sure, would be able to speak to this as well. She alluded to it, I think, in her comments, and the reality is, as far as I can tell, and as far as Rebecca would probably speak to on the ground, technically, is the franchise open to others? The answer to that question is yes. Practically, is that possible? The answer to that question is generally no. The infrastructure costs are quite high to do that. Generally, the industry sort of carves out the areas that they operate in and the areas that they don't. One of the things that Comcast is suggesting to the FCC in order to allow this acquisition to go forward is pointing out that they really operate in different market areas to a large extent. So while it would be nice to be able to say, yeah, we could open it up to competition, I think in the industry as a practical matter, you will not see that happen. And I'm happy to let the IMS director speak to that if she wishes.
Is this some?
Just Rebecca Lambie, IMS director. It is a non-exclusive franchise agreement. Anybody who wants to provide video cable services in Keene may approach the city for a franchise. Time Warner does not have a hold on it.
So what are they getting? What are you giving away until 2023?
Am I correct that they own the wires, though?
They own all of the infrastructure, that is correct.
But first of all, in technology, a tremendous amount can change between now and 2018. I don't know how you're constraining the town. What do you give? Why do they want this? What are you giving away that they're claiming? What do they own by you signing this contract? I mean, how does it affect me? You know, how does it affect the customer?
I would encourage Tom, city attorney, to also provide some input, but what it gives you is an advocate. So if you have a complaint and you're not satisfied with the result, you can call the city, or any subscriber can call the city, and we can handle it through our, in this case it would be the PLD committee if it's not resolved satisfactorily. So that's one thing that the community gets out of having this franchise. So we really are an advocate for the community in terms of the services that they are being provided.
But what are we giving? What are we signing away? Why do they want 5 more years? What are we signing away there?
City manager, perhaps.
What alternatives are we restricted to because we signed this contract?
I could see if the city manager can shed some light on it.
Well, I walked in late, so I apologize for that. So you may have already provided a portion of this answer or the answer in its entirety already. So if that's the case, please stop me. But the initial request came from the city as a result of our ongoing conversations with Cheshire TV, asking Time Warner to make several concessions. That opened up the conversation. It went back and forth relative to a variety of issues that both Time Warner, Cheshire TV, and the city of Keene were interested in. As a result of that, this arrangement relative to an extension of the existing franchise agreement came about, and now we're here this evening talking about it. A franchise agreement is non-exclusive. It's more than just an advocacy. I think that would occur if it were in the community regardless. It is an agreement between the city and any interested entity that wants to provide cable service. Unfortunately, we're a tiny market. As a result of that, there are no competition, and there will be no competition relative to infrastructure the like of what Time Warner has available to it. They couldn't afford to come in and compete. Now, if we were in metropolitan Los Angeles, there probably would be 2 or 3 providers, but not in Keene, New Hampshire, not in most small communities. So the franchise agreement is a foundation, it's a basis for an arrangement, for an agreement. It does provide for technology. In the past, it's worked quite well relative to that technology. It's only in their best interest to provide additional technology and to make improvements as they go, because they lose their customer base without it. I'm not aware of any particular disservice that's been done to the customer. Of course, people don't want to pay any more for these channels. However, Time Warner, when it negotiates these channels, as we know, CBS being a prime example, has to pay more for these channels. As a result of that, they pass along some of that cost. And there is DirecTV. There are alternatives if you feel that the service is not worth the price that you're paying for it.
Does that somewhat answer your question?
Sort of. I still don't
And
understand.
also, I apologize for not going to the public to ask for questions. My mistake. Thank you. Yeah.
Before Mrs. Landry leaves. We've been talking about 2023, and you also brought up about new technology. And one of the things around the country, Google is doing broadband, and they're doing their own, basically, non-cable service through broadband. So it would be quite possible 5-6 years from now that cable TV, such as Time Warner or Comcast is delivering, would become obsolete, and some big one like Google or someone else could come and take their place as a viable, cheaper alternative.
Yeah, what we're seeing is, like you said, eventually people moving away from cable TV services and investing more in broadband, fiber optic infrastructure. The fiber optic infrastructure can deliver voice, data, video, you name it. And so that's where we see more of the, what are some of the video providers over the web? Hulu, right? Netflix, and you'll see more and more of these internet-based providers as the broadband deployments grow. Google Fiber, don't get me started. We did apply to be a Google Fiber community. We lost to, was it Kansas City, or I think maybe it was Topeka, Kansas. But anyway, Google right now has chosen other communities to deploy their fiber optic networks in every region except New England. However, we are talking, and very much talking with people like the Economic Development Commission and Fast Roads about how we can support this concept called Gigabit Keene, so that we can, whether or not Google comes to town, we can have fiber to the doorstep one way or another, so that we continue to sort of enable this competitive landscape.
Thank you.
More community questions? Council Clark.
I would like to speak to the advocacy. As vice chairman of the former Cable TV Commission, I asked for a list of complaints, and I was told they didn't have any complaints. And I asked them why, and they told me that they didn't have to write them down. So much for the advocacy of the city. I was asking in response to a number of people who were complaining about service. We are powerless when it comes to Time Warner Cable. Clear and simple, we are powerless, and every time that we ask them of something, they refuse, and then they point to the franchise agreement saying, by law, we're only required to do this. Okay, fine. By law, we're only required to do this. We have what I think is a franchise agreement that is a bad deal for ratepayers, and has been for a number of years. In 1987, I was the host of a mayoral debate, We held it down at the old Hungry Lion. At the time, Paragon Cable was the cable provider. And they put that, they had that rotating thing that you'd see for coming events and what have you, and they would also put community events on channel, whatever it was. And at that time, they did that at their own expense. We didn't have to pay them, we didn't have to charge a cable fee or anything. And somewhere along the line, they got bought out and someone else got control. And what we have now is a situation where Time Warner is a 300-pound gorilla in the room, and we have no power over anything that they do. And we're asking them this simple little thing that's not gonna cost them it's not gonna cost them anything to give us a second channel. But they won't be a good community neighbor. They've got to go strictly by the book. They've got to go strictly by the contract. And beyond that, they've got to even go further. They've got to say, no, we want to have a 5-year, we're not going to do this for nothing. We're not going to do this. We're not going to do anything for you gratis. You know? In October, when we had this flap over going digital, they were charging elderly people $30 to come in and to configure this little box that they had to do. It was, you know, this was something that was very simple, and it was no fault of the ratepayer. They didn't do anything to change this. It was the industry that changed this. All these people making millions and millions and millions of dollars changed all of this system. You know, the people watching their TV didn't do anything. All they're doing is just paying their bill every month. Most people came in and say, okay, I'll have the box and I can figure it out, you know, I'll do it, you know, and I'll figure it out myself. But, you know, these elderly people, they can't do this. The outrageous thing that they did is when I called them up, as a Keene City Councilor, they offered to do it for me for nothing. While they're charging some 80-year-old woman $30 to do it, they're saying, oh, you're a city councilor, we'll do it for you for nothing. I gotta tell you, this Time Warner Cable Company does not deserve to have a 5-year extension on this contract. They need to step up to the plate and be good community neighbors and do something for this community, because we need it. We need a second community channel. And they need to stand up and say, okay, we support that. And we'll do it for you, because it's not gonna cost them anything. And that's what they need to do. And I'm not gonna vote to have them, you know, extend their contract.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Would it be in order that I make a motion, and if it's seconded, then it would give Councilor Clark the opportunity to make an amendment to that motion, and then he can talk to his amendment?
If we are ready to end discussion and take a motion
And then once
perhaps
and he does the amendment, then it'll open up to that discussion.
Councilor Curley?
Before we make a motion, just one comment on there. I don't think anybody's disagreeing with Councilor Clark that Time Warner Cable's the 300-pound gorilla in the room. I think you're preaching to the choir, though. We all know that. But all we're saying right here is, and we're all agreeing they need the second channel. All we're saying here is we authorize the city manager to negotiate and execute an amendment to the best of his ability. Clearly, they're a monopoly. It is what it is. But all we're saying is, city manager, do the best you can. And in the end, that's all he can do. So we can sit here all night long and complain about the woes of a big conglomerate like Time Warner, you know, but they're the only player, and quite honestly, there's not a heck of a lot we can do about it. All we can do is authorize the city manager to the best that he can. And that's it. So all the comments, they sound good, But it is what it is. And reality is, the city manager can only do the best that he can do.
Okay, anything further from the public or councilors present in take motion, perhaps amendment, or more discussion?
Move that the Finance Organization Personnel Committee recommend that the city manager be authorized to negotiate and execute an amendment to the Time Warner Cable franchise agreement.
Second. Second.
We have a motion and a second, ready for discussion, and perhaps,
I move that we remove the word "and execute" from the recommendation.
there's a motion to remove execute, meaning that the manager would negotiate and bring back the negotiated agreement for our further discussion. Is there a second to the motion at this time? Sorry, Council Clark.
Sorry, City Keene.
So we now have a motion on the floor which empowers the city manager to negotiate and execute an agreement to the best of his ability with Time Warner Cable. Anything further, city manager?
Well, Mr. Chairman, the negotiations are actually over, and included in the negotiations were Rebecca Landry's, the city manager, as well as representatives from Cheshire TV, Lee Perkins, Tom Cook, and I know they kept their board informed of the progress that was being made. So the negotiations have taken place. The only correction I would make to any of the statements, which I certainly understand and appreciate, would be that it wasn't just a second channel. I think the negotiations took a further development relative to sharing the franchise fee, and I think it was the franchise fee discussion that actually created the desire to have an extension on the contract itself. And Cheshire TV felt very strongly, and I certainly understand why they felt strongly about the franchise fee. It's their prime revenue source, and so by getting the ceiling lifted off the franchise fee, I think that's where